Hello, theme park enthusiasts and horror fans, and welcome to a very unique video on my channel. Now, to give you a bit of background, in my free time, not only do I like playing video games, but I also like to write, and particularly, I like to write horror stories. I've commented on that in a few of the videos here for the Appleford Amusement Park, because really this park is a creation not only in Planet Coaster, but is also a creation for a short story and a hopeful future book that I want to write. So, with that in mind, this episode is going to be a bit different than normal. Instead of just going over what I did as far as the build of the haunted house here, I'm instead going to read the short story that is sort of the inspiration behind the haunted house and sort of the beginnings of what will become a book about Appleford Amusement Park. Now, right away, I do want to warn you this story does have some adult content in it. It is going to talk about some disturbing things, such as death and suicide. So, if that is something that would trouble you, this may not be the video for you. You can still definitely watch the building of the haunted house, since you might want to continue watching the Appleford Amusement Park series, and you can do that just by putting it on mute, not having to listen to the audio of the story. If I have enough people in the future who would like to see the video without the audio, let me know and I will go ahead and publish a separate video just showing the actual construction and such, and maybe I'll voice over what I was doing as far as the construction then. But with that in mind, this video, as I said, is going to be actually the telling of the story about what went on, particularly at the haunted house, but it is going to talk about the park a little bit overall. Now, this is going to be a short story that will be in an anthology that I'm hoping to publish on Amazon Kindle, hopefully around June of this year. That's at least the goal. Right now, I do create these videos before they are published by quite a good amount of time. So right now it's only March. So this video may not come out till after June. I'm not exactly sure. But in either case, my goal is hopefully by June to have the full anthology edited and put it onto the Amazon Marketplace so it can be purchased on Kindle as an electronic book. If that's something that would interest you, please leave a comment and I will definitely be able to link you to that once it's available. But with that in mind, I did want to give you a bit of the backstory as the short stories in this book do tie together. And all of the short stories relate to the town of Graves Point, which Appleford Amusement Park sits just outside of. Each story is sort of a separate standalone story, but they're all horror and they all relate to this sort of evil town that I've created of Graves Point, New Mexico. With that in mind, the stories have all been sort of collected together and posed in a way by the town's librarian, and he's trying to sort of uncover what's going on with the town, as well as to sort of create a warning for people about the evils that are going on in the area. So, with that in mind, the beginning of the story here is actually going to be told by that librarian, and then we'll get into the actual events that unfolded in Appleford Amusement Park. After coming across the news article that I am attaching below, I dug through the multitude of journals that have been stored in the library. I still don't understand why they are here, but I'm beginning to think more and more that I am not the first librarian who has functioned as the town's historian and biographer. In any case, I don't know why I looked for Bill's journal. There was no reason for it to be here, but I looked anyways. After about a half an hour of flipping through journal after journal, I was about to give up. Then there it was, a small red faux leather book with the name Bill Orland written neatly on the first page. I was impressed by the neat handwriting I found inside and how studious Bill was at writing down the events of his life daily. I read over his excitement at the beginning of the school year, about how happy he was to have joined the football team as a freshman, and his heightened enthusiasm as the school year ended. Each day's writing was a paragraph or two in length, and followed a similar style of covering the highlights of that day. That pattern changed on June 5th, the night that was mentioned in the news article. Bill's writing was much more frantic in nature and spanned pages instead of paragraphs. I'm attaching a copy of what he said in that entry and the following ones here. I will then put the journal article after them. The Appleford Amusement Park has not reopened with Graves Point, And if what Bill said was to be believed at all, I hope it never will. June 5th, 2000. What the hell is going on? That guy grabbed Timmy. I saw him. But no one believes me. They're acting like they don't even know who Timmy is. It doesn't make any sense. I stopped writing for a few minutes and got a soda from the fridge. I needed to calm down a bit. I know I was just writing and not saying anything that made sense. I don't know if it will make sense in the end anyways, but I have to try. I know I need to write this down in case something happens so someone else will know what I saw. I remember Mr. Gomez telling us one day in class that if we wanted to tell a story properly, we needed to put in as much detail as we possibly could. Is it considered a story if it really happened? I don't know, but I think he is right. I need to try and say everything that happened in detail. Since it is Monday, both Timmy's and my parents head to work. Spring practice hasn't started yet, so we asked if we could go to Appleford for the day. Our parents said we could and gave us a bit of money for park entry and lunch. We biked the short ride out of Graves Point to the park. It was a nice day. There were no clouds in the sky, but it was nice and cool. We got to the park about 3 in the afternoon, I think. We wanted to stay late enough so that the sun would set and we could see all of the park's lights turn on. That's when Appleford really comes alive. Timmy used to say that. We pretty much ran down the path that goes past the Wild Mouse coasters, Midway games, and arcade to get to the Monster. The Monster is the park's giant wooden roller coaster. It sits in the middle of the park, but you can see it as soon as you walk out of the tunnel that goes from the parking lot under New Mexico State Road 6563. My dad said that the large wooden coasters started to be built in the 1920s, but he wasn't sure when the Monster was built. Dad works as the city planner in Graves Point, but he said that files from before 1982 were missing from the city's records. He did tell me, though, that he thought the Monster was over 50 years old, and that it was one of the largest wooden coasters that he knew of in the United States. The coaster's wooden structure was unpainted and would have been a giant hulking shadow in the dark on nights if it wasn't for the string of lights that were attached along the walkways that went on either side of the tracks. The same lights were on most of the buildings in Appleford, and make me think about pictures of old carnivals and such that my history teacher, Miss Taylor, showed us during class one day. The Monster Station building also has the yellow lights on it. The large white building has purple trim that also makes me think about carnivals. Dad says it was how a lot of amusement parks looked back in the day, and that Appleford just hasn't updated the building's appearance. The entrance to the Monster Station goes along lockers where people can put stuff they don't want to take on the ride, as well as parking areas for wheelchairs, scooters, and strollers. After you get off the roller coaster, you go down a ramp into the ride's gift shop where you can buy a t-shirt or on-ride photo. Timmy and I don't usually look around the gift shop, though. We've seen all this stuff before and just want to hurry around to get in line to go on the ride again. I don't know if this is what Mr. Gomez meant by putting in detail or not. I could try showing him what I'm writing, but I know he wouldn't believe me either. Anyways, it wasn't busy in the park, but we knew that there would be a line for the Monster, so we hurried there right away. The other coasters in the park are okay, but they just don't give you the same feeling as the Monster. None of the other coasters are as tall, and most of them are metal, which make you feel safer in a way. With the Monster, when you go down that first drop, you feel like the little lap bar is not going to hold you in, and that you're going to come flying out of your seat. As the train rockets up and down the hills and around the curves that send the track back through the wooden structure, you get the feeling over and over again, until you are suddenly at the end and pulling back into the station. We were surprised to find when we got to the Monster this morning that there wasn't much of a line at all. Within minutes we were climbing the familiar lift hill, going around the slow curve at the top before racing down the coaster's first drop. Timmy was whooping and holding his arms above his head, while I held onto my lap bar like I always do. I remember feeling so happy and free, like nothing could make our day any better. We rode the Monster 3 times in a row, then went on the other coasters. By the time we got off the Boomerang coaster at the back of the park, the sun was starting to set. I was caught off guard a bit when Timmy asked where everyone else was. I guess in a way, I had noticed how easily we'd gotten on all of the rides, and how there hadn't been a lot of people in line. But I hadn't really given it much thought. It was a Monday, so I didn't think there would be too many people at the park, even if it was summer. But when Timmy mentioned it, I realized the park had seemed unnaturally empty. And while I was glad to have been able to get on so many rides so quickly, I did wonder what was going on. Before I could even say anything, though, Timmy had walked over to the person at the photo kiosk for the Rewind, the boomerang coaster. I was standing back a few feet, so didn't hear what they said, but I watched as she pointed toward the other side of the back of the park. Tim looked excited and thanked her before walking to me and grabbing my arm. He pulled me toward the exit excitedly. "Come on, Bill." I let him lead me, but I was confused. "What's going on?" Tim didn't stop but looked back at me, smiling as he pulled me faster. "The haunted house reopened today." As his words sank in, multiple thoughts rushed through my mind all at once. The haunted house had closed last year in August and had been all winter. The Graves Point Gazette had said that the ride had been closed for remodeling and to upgrade the quality of the scares inside. We'd been excited to get to the park this morning, so I hadn't looked at the newspaper, where I guessed the ride's reopening would have been described. As we walked along the pathways toward the garden area of the park, I thought about how cheesy the effects used to be in the haunted house, and how they still sort of scared me. I didn't want to seem like a chicken, but I was really worried about how the ride would be now if the scares had been upgraded. We reached the garden area and Timmy guided me toward the back of the area where the haunted house sat. The park is divided into 4 sections. The front of the park is divided down the middle by the entrance path. The park is divided into the front and back by the monster, and the back of the park is divided by a path that went to the back of the park's train station. The back portion of the right of the path was a garden area. It had been set up with narrow walking paths that were lit by decorative metal arches. I know a lot of teen couples walk through this area and sometimes find a bench in the secluded area to make out. There's an old monorail that goes over the area so people can look at the flowers, trees, and fountains. The path Timmy took us on skirted most of the garden area, and I could only see a bit of it as the haunted house came into view. While the old lighted lettering on the ride sign still was attached to the roof, I could see that the entire front of the ride looked different as we got closer. The 2 sides of the Victorian building still had the stained glass and balconies that the ride went out onto, but the middle portion of the ride was entirely different. Before, it just looked like a Victorian mansion, and you got onto the ride once you went through its front door. Now the front was open, and we could see the ride car loading area. Above that, though, was the major change. Previously, the ride, I think, went down a hallway over the front entrance. But now there was a drop in the area, where the carts went down a ramp before going back up and through another door. The change not only added a thrill to the ride, but also allowed us to hear the riders' screams as we waited in line. The riders' screams made me more nervous, but I realized I couldn't say anything as Timmy dragged me into the line. I couldn't tell my best friend I was scared, or he would tease me about it forever. So I just stood with him as we waited and tried to act like I was excited to go on the ride. Timmy and I may not have known the ride was reopening, but it seemed like a lot of other people had. I saw about 20 kids I knew from school, and it seemed like there was a lot of people from out of town waiting to go on the ride too. Some of the teenagers in line talked excitedly, and I could hear a few details about the ride, as it had been on already and were going again. I tried to listen, but also couldn't help but focus on the scenery of the queue line. Most rides in the park just had basic queues that might have some flowers or trees to make it look nice. But the queue for the haunted house was redone as well, and we were walking past graves and tombstones as we made our way toward the house. There was a couple of open graves along the path, and it seemed like mist was coming out of them. At one grave, I screamed as a robotic skeleton came out of the grave and scared me. Timmy laughed, but I could see he was a bit on edge, too, and looked whiter than normal. There were a lot of people in line, and it felt like we waited nearly an hour to get onto the ride. By the time we got to the house, the sun had set over the mountain, and the lights of the park were all on. The ride's car was repainted, but otherwise seemed the same as it used to be. I gripped the lap bar really tight as we jolted forward, and our car banged into the ride's doors, opening them. The doors slammed shut behind us, and we were in complete darkness. As the car moved along, we came to different scares where a light would come on, revealing a demon, skeleton, or murderous clown, and a horrible noise would play. I screamed multiple times and was embarrassed originally, until I realized that Tim was also screaming some of the scares. When a car horn sounded and headlights flashed at us, Timmy screamed, thinking we were about to be hit and killed. Both of us couldn't help but scream as we started climbing the chain lift to the second floor. Off to the side, a fire blast went upwards, lighting up the area and making it feel like we were going to lose our eyebrows. A lot of the scenes were really scary, but all I can think about now is the drop. I'm trying to write out all the details, but I feel like I need to discuss what happened there. I can't hold it in any longer. After several more rooms and frights, we came to a door that opened right onto the drop. The track of the ride sloped down like a roller coaster, and we dropped a story down towards the ride's entrance. I gripped the lap bar like I always do, and Tim put his hands up like on a roller coaster drop. The car went up the other side of the drop, and the door in front of us opened automatically. I screamed as we were suddenly face to face with a mirror. I think the purpose was to frighten riders as they'd see themselves when they came through the door and think that the car was about to collide with another. But I was screaming for a different reason. I saw our car in the mirror like the ride intended. I saw the shock on my own face and the startled look on Timmy's. But what made me scream was that I saw someone else in the mirror too. There was an elderly, thin man, seeming to be standing in front of us in the image. Though he looked like he was in his 80s, something about the look on his face terrified me. His thin lips were pulled back from his teeth in a snarl. His long white hair was receding, but what remained hung down in wet strings behind him. As I screamed, I saw his snarl grow. I don't know how to explain it, but his teeth seemed wrong, like they were too white and sharp. I watched in horror as his arm suddenly reached out from the mirror. The glass seemed to move like water and ripple as his thin arms, in his old gray suit, reached out toward us. I couldn't move or even scream again as his thin fingers, with long sharp nails, really they were more like claws, grabbed Tim. Timmy still had his arms up after the drop, the shock of seeing the man in the mirror having stopped him from moving. I could only watch as the man's fingers gripped Tim's shirt. I don't think I'll ever get Timmy's scream out of my mind as he was pulled from the seat, the lap bar not able to hold him in. The car turned suddenly, pulling me away from the mirror, but I was able to turn fast enough to see Timmy's sneakers vanishing into the mirror and to hear his scream suddenly stop. I think his scream stopped, but I can't be sure. I lost it completely and started screaming, unable to really understand what had just happened. I screamed throughout the rest of the ride. No one seemed to realize something was wrong, though. I guess they thought I had just been terrified by the ride itself. It wasn't until I got to the ride's exit when a staff member realized I wasn't okay. I couldn't form words. I just kept screaming with my hands clenched on the lap bar. After the staff member couldn't get me out of the cart and couldn't get me to say what was wrong, she called park security. The two members of security were kind, and they helped me out of the car and took me to the security office. I had stopped screaming as they'd helped me out of the haunted house, but it took me almost an hour before I was able to say what had happened. By then, they realized that something was seriously wrong and had contacted the Graves Point police. The security guards and two officers listened to what I said before one of the officers went to interview the haunted house's staff. I understand how crazy what I said must have been to them. Even as I'm writing it here, I realize how unbelievable it seems. But what happened next was what made me even more confused and seems even more unbelievable to me. After about half an hour or so, the officer came back and asked me about Timmy. He asked me what he was wearing that day, what he looked like, and several other questions. I answered each, confused by some of them, as I didn't really see how they would help the police find my friend. After I'd answered his questions, the officer said the thing that I can't understand. His voice was gentle, and he put a hand on my shoulder as he spoke. Bill, I've spoken with several members of the staff. The staff members at the haunted house do not remember seeing your friend Timmy go on the ride. They say you were alone when you got on it. I still don't understand it at all. I don't know if they lied because they were worried about getting in trouble, or maybe they know who the man in the mirror was or trying to cover for him. I told the officers they were lying, but I could see that between how my story sounded and what the ride operators had said, they were having trouble believing me. The officers tried to calm me down and said they would investigate what happened. The officers then said they would take me home, and I could see trying to argue anymore wouldn't help. I sat in silence as they drove me back to town, and went to my room while they talked to my parents about what happened. I spent the past several hours trying to write here what happened. My mom's come in to check on me. She didn't ask about what happened, but I could tell she was worried. I'm not sure if she believed what I said to the officers, or is more worried about my sanity. Either way, she said I needed to try and get some rest. I seriously doubt I will sleep at all tonight. I can't get Timmy's scream out of my head. Even still, though, I probably should lay down and turn off my light so that my parents can go to bed and not worry about me. Hopefully, when Tim isn't home tonight and his parents talk to the police, they will take what I said more seriously. I guess I will just have to wait and see in the morning. I don't think there is anything else I can do tonight. June 6, 2000. I don't understand anything anymore. Am I going insane? I did fall asleep for a few hours, and when I woke up, I felt like what happened yesterday must have been a bad dream. I figured I would go downstairs for breakfast, everything would be normal, and I could laugh with my parents about my nightmare. But when I got downstairs, I knew it hadn't been a dream. My mother and father looked up at me worried, and I thought they had some news about Timmy. Instead, though, my father had me sit down, looking worried, and asked me about what had happened yesterday and who this Timmy was that I was talking about. I was confused by what he meant. I told him everything I wrote here last night. My parents listened, but they seemed more and more worried as I talked. When I finished talking, my father sat there looking at me for a minute, seeming to be studying me. When he spoke, it was like he was choosing his words carefully. Bill, your mom and I don't remember any of your friends having the name Timmy. If yesterday hadn't happened, I would have thought he was joking. Tim had been over multiple times for sleepovers. He was my best friend, and spent almost as much time at my house as I did. Looking at my parents' faces, though, I could tell they were serious. They were looking at me with confusion, wondering who Tim was. Even though a part of me realized that I couldn't make them know who he was, I tried. In the end, my parents still couldn't remember him and tried to gently end the conversation so they could go to work. I came back to my room and wrote this all down. I'm going to go over to Javier's house. Maybe he can help me make sense of this all. June 6, 2000, night. I don't know what is going on. I had to sit here for like an hour before I could even write. I'm so upset. I went over to Javier's house to talk to him about what happened to Timmy, and he looked at me in complete confusion. He thought I was joking and had made up some creative story to scare him. Dude, you could have at least used one of our friends so it was more believable. When he said that, I didn't understand at first. What do you mean? You invent some kid named Timmy and act like he is your best friend? I mean, ouch. I've been your best friend since 3rd grade. I know I probably sat there looking at Javier for over a minute. I realized he was being honest, too. He didn't remember Timmy, just like my parents didn't, just like the people at the park didn't. I realized if I pushed it anymore, it wouldn't help. He wasn't going to remember, and if I pushed, it was going to make me seem crazy. Maybe I am crazy. I decided the best thing I could do was laugh. I started laughing hysterically and hoped it looked like I was joking. Javier seemed to study me for a long time, seeing if I was truly joking or not, but after I feared he was going to think I was crazy, he seemed to accept it and started laughing with me. He had me going, man. He laughed again and slapped me on the back. Good one. I was suddenly struck by an idea. Hey, do you have a yearbook from last year? I'm curious if there even is a Timmy in our grade. Javier agreed and started looking through his bookshelf for his yearbook. I figured I would be casual about it. I'd flip through the pages, acting like I was looking for a Timmy. Then when I found Tim's picture, I'd point to it. I hoped seeing Tim's picture would make Javier remember. Javier brought the book back and sat next to me on his bed. I took the yearbook and began flipping through it. Tim's last name is Harper. Though I did my best to act casual, I felt like I hurried to the page where his picture would be, needing for this nightmare to end. When I got to the H's, I realized this horror had no end. I stared down at the pictures and saw Roger Haley's picture, followed by Tiffany Harrison's. Tim's should have been between them, but it wasn't. There was no space for it. It wasn't like it was missing. It just didn't exist. Reading the words I just wrote now, I realized the easiest answer is, I am insane. In the moment, though, I just sat there looking at the page. I don't know how long I was looking at the page in confusion, but I finally noticed that Javier was speaking. Find any Timmys? I was still stunned by the yearbook, but I knew I had to get it together. I shook my head and shut the book. I struggled to find my voice and faked a smile. Nope, I guess I should have chosen a better name. Javier laughed at that and took the book back. As I said, you still had me going with it, man. I watched as he walked back to his bookshelf, and I screamed. Just when I thought that things couldn't get any weirder, I looked in the mirror Javier had on the wall across from his bed. Timmy was smiling back at me from the other side of the glass, and as I screamed, he seemed to laugh and wave at me. Javier spun around, scared by my scream. What is it? I pointed to the mirror where Timmy stood, smiling at me. Something about that smile wasn't okay. I can't explain it, but it didn't seem like Timmy. Javier looked at his mirror and then turned back to me in confusion. What's wrong? The concern in his voice made me look away from Timmy and toward him. I could see in his face his confusion, and I realized that he didn't see Timmy in the mirror. I don't know how I knew it, but I did. Maybe it was because he hadn't screamed too. Maybe because his face was focused on me and not on the mirror. I don't know. I was just sure that he didn't see what I did. I knew with everything that went on, he had to be questioning my sanity. How could he not be? I'm questioning my sanity, and I've lived through this. I swallowed and tried to think quickly. Your mirror. I forgot you had a mirror there. When you walked by it, I saw your movement in it and thought someone else was in the room. Scared the hell out of me. Javier studied my face for a minute, then began to laugh. You scared the hell out of me, man. He shook his head and smiled. Don't worry. I won't tell Katie you screamed like a girl. I could feel my face flush with embarrassment. You sure you're good, man? You seem jumpy. I nodded. Yeah, I guess I'm just overtired. Spent most of the day yesterday at Appleford. I wish that I could have gone with you. Mom had a bunch of chores for me to do, though. As I tried to act normal and just tell him about the amusement park some, I avoided looking at the mirror. I knew what I'd seen there, and I couldn't deal with it. After talking with Javier for a little while, I came back home. I feel like I'm spending more and more time in my room, alone. It's the only place I feel safe. I don't know if I'm going crazy or not, but I think everyone else believes I am. I just need to stay in my room, where I'm safe, and try to figure everything out. June 6th, 2000. Later. I'm not safe anywhere. About 10 minutes ago, I went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. After washing my face, I looked up and screamed again. Timmy was smiling from the glass at me. It looked like he was standing next to me in the reflection. It got even worse as he moved his hand in the image and seemed to put it on my shoulder. I don't care how crazy it sounds, but I could feel his arm on me. He seemed to know that I felt him, and his smile got even wider. It may not make sense, but I know it wasn't Tim. The smile wasn't his at all. It was cruel and evil. I was about to step away from the mirror when Timmy spoke. The sound seemed to come through the glass as if it wasn't there and he was just standing in front of me. Don't be afraid, Billy. There's nothing to be scared of. I don't know why, but hearing Timmy's voice made me feel a bit calmer. Instead of running away from the mirror screaming, I talked back to the glass. What's going on? I saw that guy grab you on the ride, and ever since nothing has made sense. It's okay, Billy. Mr. Appleford is a really nice guy. Mr. Appleford? The entire situation makes no sense. I get that now. At the time, though, I was confused most by Timmy saying the name of the man who created the local amusement park. What do you mean? No one from the Appleford family has been in town for years now, Timmy. Timmy's evil smile grew, and I felt pain in my shoulder as he squeezed it in the mirror's image. That's what most people think, Bill. They think Joseph Appleford died over 40 years ago. But they're wrong. He's always here, in the shadows, in the darkness. I could see Tim's lips pull back from his teeth as he grinned, seeing me realize what he was saying. In the mirrors, I looked back at Timmy, and the monstrous distortion of his face nodded slowly. I realized now part of what made me think he looked evil. His teeth were not Timmy's anymore. They were jagged fangs. Now you're getting it, Billy. He can move through the mirrors, portals from the darkness into our world. And now I can too. I stood horrified, looking at the monster that used to be my best friend. I can't explain it exactly, but I understand now why no one remembers Timmy, why it seems like he doesn't exist. It's because he doesn't. When he was pulled through the mirror in the haunted house, Timmy stopped existing in this world. The thing that was looking back at me from the mirror wasn't Timmy. It's a monster. He seemed to sense what I was thinking and spoke again. Want to see a trick Mr. Appleford taught me? The figure in the mirror tightened his grip on me and bent toward me. I watched in horror as his mouth opened and he bit my shoulder. I screamed again, but this time it was in pain, not fright. Even though he wasn't next to me, I felt his teeth bite into me. I jumped away from the mirror and was about to run down the hallway when I heard Timmy laughing behind me from the mirror. I turned slowly around and saw my former friend's face looking back at me from the mirror. Blood, my blood, dripped from his mouth, and he smiled his horrible smile again. There's no point in running, Billy. You saw what happened in the haunted house. No one believes you. But Mr. Appleford doesn't want any loose ends. I started to say how I wouldn't tell anyone, and how their secret was safe, but Timmy waved his hand to make me stay quiet. There's no point in saying anything, Billy. He's made up his mind. You can try to fight it all you want, but he's everywhere. No matter how hard you try, he will find you. He will get you, and he will bring you back to the amusement park. Then you will be with us, forever. As the thing in the mirror laughed horribly, I ran from the bathroom back to my bedroom. I locked my bedroom door and sat down to write this all out. I don't have a mirror in here, so I feel I'm a bit safer. But I know that what Timmy said was true. I can't run from them or avoid them forever. I just had to look at my shoulder to know that was the truth. I took my shirt off, and on my shoulder I had a bite mark. It was about the size of Timmy's mouth, but each of the tooth marks was a bloody hole where his jagged teeth bit into me. He might have been an image in a mirror, but he was able to hurt me still. And if he was able to do that, then there's nothing that would stop him, or Mr. Appleford, from doing much worse. I stopped writing for a bit of time. I needed to think about what had happened and what I wanted to do. I've been sitting here thinking through everything a lot. I've reread what I've written over the past few days. I don't know what the thing in the mirror was. I refuse to think that it is Timmy. He was my best friend, and was never cruel like that thing is. I don't know what happened to Timmy when Mr. Appleford grabbed him, but I believe he died soon after. I'm not sure what that thing in the mirror is, but the things that my mind guesses at terrify me. In the end, it doesn't matter. I know it isn't my friend. However, I realize that I do believe what the creature said. It was able to touch me and to hurt me. I saw Mr. Appleford pull Timmy through the mirror in the haunted house, and there was no reason to believe he wouldn't be able to do the same thing to me from another mirror. As the thing in the mirror said, no one believes me, but I do know what happened to Timmy. That makes me a loose end, as the thing said. In that way, I believe what the thing said. Mr. Appleford will come for me. I don't know if he will drag me back to Appleford Amusement Park, or if he will kill me in some horrible way, or the worst worry I have is that he will make me into some monster like the thing that looks like Timmy. There's no one I can go to. No one even remembers Timmy. It's like he's been erased from history. Having tried to talk to people about him has just made them think I'm crazy. If I tried to tell them that I see some creature now that looks like Timmy in my mirror, they would have me locked away. And even then, I'm sure there would be a mirror somewhere, a way that Mr. Appleford could get to me. I don't know if he can completely leave the mirror, or if he can just reach out of it like he did in the haunted house. I don't think it really matters, though. Sooner or later, he would get me. As it is, I hear strange noises coming from down the hallway. I know they are coming from the bathroom, and I am terrified about what they could be. I checked my door again to make sure it's locked, but I don't think it will do me much good. I've only been able to come up with one thing I can do. I won't let Mr. Appleford get me. I won't let him do what he did to Timmy. I am not crazy. Everything I've written is the truth. I don't understand it all myself, but I've realized I don't have time to figure it out. I need to act now, while I still can. To whoever reads this, please warn others. Tell them about Mr. Appleford, and about the haunted house. I don't think he will stop, and if he can't get to me, he will find another victim. Mom and Dad, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I love you both so much. I didn't want any of this to happen. Please know that. Goodbye. Here's the article from the weekly Graves Point Gazette that made me look for Bill's journal. June 9th, 2000. Graves Point High School student's suicide raises concerns about mental health, by Candace Wilson. On Wednesday morning, the body of Bill Orland was found in his home after he had not come down for breakfast. The teenager's parents, Marcus and Tabitha, found that his bedroom door was locked and he was not answering. His father broke through the door and found his son in his closet, having hung himself with a belt at some point during the night. Police Chief Jefferson stated that the young boy was pronounced dead at the scene. While the young man's death was sudden and left many people with questions, Bill's behavior recently, as well as his journal, suggests that he may have been suffering from some untreated psychological issues. In recent days, he had mentioned to multiple people a boy named Timmy, who he said was his best friend, though no such boy seems to have existed according to his friends and family. While having an imaginary friend at 14 is odd, the more troubling part of the situation with Timmy is that Bill seemed to believe that his friend had been abducted when the two had visited Appleford Amusement Park. The delusion went so far as that Billy had alerted the police to report that Timmy had been kidnapped on the newly reopened haunted house ride on June 5th. Over the next day, it seems that Bill's mental health deteriorated quickly, leading him to believe that his imaginary friend had somehow become sinister in nature. Chief Jefferson said that Bill's parents did not realize the distress that their son was under, and that they were shocked by his suicide. When questioned about a claim that Bill had made in his journal about having been bitten by Timmy, Chief Jefferson acknowledged that Bill did have an injury to his shoulder, but there was no signs of foul play. Jefferson believes that Bill had suffered this injury earlier, and that his declining mental health made him believe that the injury was somehow connected with what he had felt was going on. The main takeaway that Chief Jefferson wants to impress upon Graves Point citizens is that parents need to pay attention to any warning signs they may notice with their children. Parents need to understand it is the summer, their kids are not in school all day, and under the supervision of teachers and other staff. So while I understand parents still may have to work and such, they need to try and spend some time with their kids where they can. Children may also be suffering from boredom, loneliness, and depression from not seeing their friends daily as they do during the school year. Parents really need to pay attention to any odd changes in their children's behavior. What happened to the Orland family is a tragedy, and as a community, we need to do our best to ensure that we learn from it so that similar situations do not occur again. If you feel that your child is suffering from some distress, please seek immediate assistance from either local medical staff or from my office. Trust me when I say I'd rather my officers spend time out of their day making someone feel valued and noticed instead of having to spend their time at a scene like we did this week. The article concluded with contact information for local emergency services, including a crisis line, which seemed to have been set up recently, but not because of Billy's death. I have a feeling that as I look more into what is going on in Graves Point at the time, I will find other horrible stories that made the creation of a crisis line necessary. The town didn't just close 25 years ago, it was abandoned. The people didn't move away, they fled. And as horrible as Billy's story is, I don't think he was the only, and possibly not even the worst one. That being said, having read Billy's journal myself, I don't believe the report or police chief are correct. Billy didn't suffer from some mental illness that made him commit suicide. He saw it as his only way out of a horrifying situation. I find myself questioning if the police chief and reporter didn't know that too, and the article was more an attempt to cover up something that they didn't feel the town was capable of coping with. If Miss Wilson had done any research for her article, she would have found that Billy's claim about his friend being abducted from Appleford was not the first such claim about the amusement park. Looking through the library's newspapers, I have found 3 other cases of people claiming that someone disappeared at the park. One of the stories even mentioned how the child had been abducted by a tall, elderly man. It makes me wonder how many other cases there might be that were never documented because people had forgotten that the victim ever existed, and thus didn't believe the story of the missing person's friend. The fact is, something has been going on at Appleford Amusement Park. People have gone missing, and if Billy's story is to be believed, then if they are ever seen again, it could be far worse than if they were just gone. Somehow, a place that was meant to bring people thrills and enjoyment is instead a harbinger of horror. That concludes my short story on Appleford Amusement Park. As I said, I hope to include this in an anthology that I am working on currently that I am hoping to title Graves Point Legacy. So, if you are interested in that, please feel free to contact me in the comments here, and I will let you know when it does actually get published on Amazon Kindle. But with that in mind, if you did enjoy the short story or the creation video behind it with the amusement park and the haunted house, please go ahead and give this video a like. And if you've not already, please subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon, so that you're aware when I produce more videos in the future. Thank you, and I hope to see you all again for more of Appleford Amusement Park. So, to conclude the video, why don't we take a ride on the haunted house and see what it is that Bill saw on that June 5th.